Welcome to Gunner Pavilion. Arsenal won, Brentford won, and an away performance from Arsenal that felt very just there. Um, I knew it was always going to be a difficult ground. Brentford have done so well at home. I think they've only lost twice. And I felt that this was going to be tough, but I felt like we could have done a little bit more. We should have won this game. I thought we were going to do what we did against Leeds. Um, so we're going to look into this game and we're going to break down, the three things Arsenal did well and the three things that we could improve. This one's going to be a little bit different, guys. Just going to bear with me because I want to touch on a couple of areas. I want to do a couple of other analysis as well of what actually happened in this game, because there's been lots of conversations and good ones around the performance of some of the Arsenal players, and we're gonna we're gonna touch on a couple of them in this analysis. So yeah, let's get into this. Three ups, three down. Arsenal won, Brentford won. Okay, so this performance was a bit of a gutsy one, I would say. It felt like those sort of away games that we used to have in Stoke. I mean, it had all the elements. It was raining, it was physical, there was long throws. It felt like Rory Delap, was playing for Brentford, and that's how good Coyote's throwings were in this game. And just zooming out, right? I want to get this out of the way. Uh, this game in our road to 90 was in the bucket of, a lot of away games where we've already gotten 10 out of 13. And this game was one that was supposed to get us back on track, especially after we had the draw against Nottingham Forest. So to have another draw again in this one, it just tightens that margin. I mean, we're still on track to get 90 points, but now the margin is so small, and especially with all the other competitions ramping up, FA Cup coming into the picture, Champions League gonna come back into the picture. This is going to be a huge performance for Arsenal to stay focused and get this title. So, I mean, Brentford, is exactly the type of, team that can punish emotional overcommitment. The thing with this game was that it was the last game, in a midweek. So everyone has just been building it up, and stoking it up. And so Brentford, we're well ready for this game. And this is going to happen a lot as we go into this run. Manchester City are going to have games like this where they're going to play long after Arsenal have played, and you're going to wait and hear all the build-ups and everything, So I still expect, twists and turns in this title race. So I think we can look at this game with a bit of disappointment, but with also a bit of perspective, as well. Listen, Brentford are the best in the league in terms of fast breaks, and this was something that we actually stopped them from doing. And they love to leave up those second balls, as we can see from the goal that they scored. So, what did Arsenal do? I think Arsenal largely prevented Brentford from having those fast breaks, but we just didn't stop them on another thing that they are very good at. And listen, from a team like us that is also very good at set pieces, you also have to recognize is when certain teams just have a little bit of an edge over you. There's probably nothing to separate Arsenal and Brentford when it comes to set pieces. So it was always going to be a game that might be tilted in that direction. I want to talk about the structure and midfield control in this game. And I'm going to talk about that, looking at, Rice and Zubimendi, particularly. So I'm going to start with Declan Rice and just look at, his passing map in this game. Declan Rice, he had 62 out of 67 passes, about 93%, accuracy there, and three key passes, and that's important. Just wanted to just hold on to that because it would make more sense, as I start to build the picture and why that three key pass was very important. 95% completion, especially in the opposition half. Now, let's also look at Zubimendi. Zubimendi had a decent game. Okay, 34 out of 36. His passing, probably less passing than Declan Rice. Declan Rice was all over the place. He's I cannot put into words the sort of player that he is. This guy is phenomenal. The amount of running that he does in the game, and that tackle. Oh, that tackle! What a tackle! But Zubimendi, if you look at his passing map again, like I said, 34 out of 36, 94% accuracy. But the key isn't really the numbers, right? Is where those passes happen. And you can see, from their heat maps, a lot of it in the central zones, under pressure, Brentford pressing, and was one thing that Brentford did very well in that first half. They really pressed us, quite well. But we didn't give them any transitional moment. And I think that's adult football, that's mature football. Because teams like this, you don't beat them by playing basketball. You really beat them by suffocating and taking away what they're very, very good at. Another thing that I want to touch on before we go into our 3 ups and 3 downs, and is this debate about Eze. He is a bit of a conundrum, and he's dividing a lot of the Arsenal fans. Right now, there's some people that absolutely have don't want anything to do with him. He's rubbish. He's not useful. He doesn't do anything in the pitch. And I don't know if I totally agree with that. I've been called Eze's agent. I've been called some interesting things around my defending of Eze. But I think that it's fair to say that Eze wasn't his brilliant best in this game, but he wasn't the only one. I think structurally, our midfield and what Brentford was able to do just limit our ability to effectively unlock a 10 in this game. This was not a game for a 10, and even when Odegaard came into the game, he didn't really operate as a 10, as we'll look into that a little bit more. So let's just put some context into this, and let's talk about creativity. Okay, so let's start with Eze, right? And I know that sometimes stats can be misleading, but after all is said and done, sometimes you want to go look at the numbers, and sometimes they can confirm things. I take that, but other times it just gives you a little bit context of what really happened in the game. And look at Eze's passing map here. So Eze had 9 out of 11 passes, 8 of them were in the opposition half. But more importantly, look at the direction of the passes. They were vertical, progressive, forward passing. If I say that, let's contrast that, with Odegaard. And, while watching the game, it felt like Odegaard brought a different sort of dynamism to the game, a different profile, to the game. There's one thing that Odegaard does in the Arsenal team that I don't think any other Arsenal player does very well, and that's pressing. And when you're able to press well with the right angles, it does something to the decision making of the team with the ball. And we'll see that in this game when you're watching it at live. That is the Odegaard effect, where he does allow the rest of the players to either follow his lead without the press, to position themselves structurally in the game, but also you give yourself a high probability of getting that ball back as quickly as possible. Now, from an Odegaard perspective, he definitely had more of the ball. Which is typically what happens with Odegaard. No, 15 out of 18 passes, 13 of them in the opposition half. Um, but look at the arrows, right? Look at the arrows. There's more circulation, when it comes to Odegaard's passes, more lateral movement, so to speak. Zero key passes. Same with Eze. And this is not to say that Odegaard was poor. I think it just talks about the different roles within this Arsenal team and the game state and what Arteta is requiring from the players, depending on the opposition that we're playing. And you could say that Eze was the most vertical passer in this game. Doesn't mean that he was the better player by any means, but um, it just kind of showed that this game generally lacked a lot of penetration. And when I talked about Declan Rice having three key passes, he was the one that had three key passes in the game, not Odegaard, not Eze. And what does that tell you? If a player who is playing in that 8 sort of 6 position is having those three key passes, it just tells you that there wasn't a lot as a unit happening in the midfield when it came to creativity. And Arsenal had to go down the wide channels in order to try and affect the game. So if you're thinking about, what stalled Arsenal in that game, that's exactly what happened. There wasn't enough creativity in that middle of the park. Give credit to Brentford as well, but some of the Arsenal players could have done a little bit better, and I include Eze into this as well. But what I'm saying is that to just single him out, as the worst player, and the fact that he got taken off in the second half, beginning of the second half, was not an indictment that he was the worst player. I think Arsenal just needed something in that game. And listen, this game flow, right? Brentford really wanted this game to be physical, and that's exactly what they got. When it's rainy and you're playing at home with your fans at the back, that's the kind of game that you want. Is start and stop, free kicks, throwings, all of those kind of high chaos situations. In order to take advantage of them, so it's a lot of long diagonals. I felt like we dealt with Igor Thiago quite well. I know he had that header that Raya absolutely pulled off a save after he had created the problem himself. But I thought in the main we held him quite well. I mean, towards the end of the game, it was a little bit chaotic, and of course, the tackle by Mosquera and also the tackle by, Declan Rice. But that's towards the end of the game where you're trying to win it, and sometimes they say if you can't win it, don't lose it. And a lot of the things that happen in the last 15 minutes of the game, it's kind of what can happen in a game like this. But Rice, I thought screened Brentford quite well. Um, Gabriel and Mosquera coming into this game, dealt with a lot of the aerial duels. Our fullbacks didn't overcome it, especially on the left-hand side, and Capierre rarely progressed forward. He had a few runnings in there, and Timber, as well, did a few couple of things. But I just felt like, our balance in the attack wasn't really in the right place. The right hand side, Madueke was doing all he could. On the left hand side, Trossard wasn't, and it was no surprise when Mikel Arteta absolutely changed that left hand side, brought in Calafiori and Martinelli, as well. So I wanted to just talk about that and just do a little bit of that, because I just want us to have a little bit of context, and especially when we go for these players, we have to. I understand the emotion, and listen, it is disappointing. Would I have wanted Arsenal to win this game? Absolutely, and there is some disappointment there, but at the same time, let's support the players. Let's not really single them out. My 3 ups, for this game, gonna make that quick because we've already been here for a while. So, the first one, we dominated the central zones. The midfield control was there. We limited transitions. Something that Brentford is really, really good at. We limited that. We detected the tempo, which is half the battle. Only half the battle. Okay, second up is his vertical threat, right? He tried to move the block genuinely, and I think it's also adding to his game. We might not see it all coming together in this season, but I think this is education for EZE to play in an Arsenal system, and I think he's going to be even better. And then the third off for me, we did have emotional maturity in this game. It wasn't desperation, and we might look back at this point as a very, very important one. Okay, so 3 downs for me. Lack of central incision. I think I kind of touched on that when I was doing the analysis. And Odegaard's map, really tells the story. A lot of lateral movement, not enough penetration, as well. This is something that has to improve because we're going to hit teams like this, especially the teams that we're going to be playing in the stretch, teams that are either fighting for something, relegation and all of that. So it's going to be tense. So we just got to improve on that. Our wide thread was inconsistent. That was second down for me. I thought we could improve in that area. Trossard and Martinelli didn't consistently tilt that back line. Everything was coming on the right hand side, and to be fair, we lost a little bit of that when Madueke came off the pitch. I don't know if Saka got into the game as well. I'm not even sure he had a lot of touches. He wasn't quite himself, and I understand he's coming back from injury, so maybe he really this game was a little bit too early for him as well. Third down, we had the ball, but we didn't consistently occupy the central penalty zones. I want to give a quiet mention to Gyökeres. I thought his hold-up play was exquisite today. And if we, especially that hold-up play to send Martinelli clear, and Martinelli should do better. Absolutely should do better with that chance. And he normally buries them. But maybe it's because he didn't have a long way to run to the goal, because usually if he's running from the halfway line, I'm probably more confident that he buries it. Maybe this was too close to the goal for him. But guys, this wasn't vintage Arsenal by any means. I think there is some maturity to be seen in this game. Doesn't feel like that when you look at it and you kind of reflect on how that game went. But if we're trying to win this title, it's going to be about accumulation. This is the final stretch where you just want to keep getting points. And listen, Manchester City's performance against Liverpool and against Fulham, looked like they were putting pressure on Arsenal. But hey, in the context of everything, we started the weekend, 6 points ahead. We're going into the next weekend 4 points ahead. So I think Manchester City will feel quite confident about that, being able to pull Arsenal back in. But we're also going to play Wolves, which is a really key game before Manchester City play again. So we could be 7 points, ahead in that after that game. So hey, we got to keep it going. Next test is obviously FA Cup. So we just gotta take one foot after the other, and just keep it going. So guys, that was my Arsenal review. 3 ups, 3 downs to the Brentford game. Not exactly the result that we wanted, but I think that we can still continue to look at us ultimately getting to where we want to go. So don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I do appreciate all of you as well. And I'll see you in the next preview when we'll look at the Arsenal versus Wigan game in the FA Cup. I'll see you in the next one.